All right, this time got one of the big cassette decks from the late 70s. Pioneer CT F1250. These were manufactured between 79 and 81. This one is date stamped to 1979. And as referenced in earlier videos about Pioneer and dating those, after about 1969, you can look at the serial number. There are a few letters that it starts with. The first letter is the year, the second letter is the month. Those do roll over at some point, so you also have to look at the gear and ask yourself, okay, does this look like it's from 1979 or from like 1991, right? And I don't know if those years use the same letter. I'm just using that as an example. So, three-head cassette deck. It's a chunky cassette deck. It's on the large side. Its dimensions are 16 3/4 by 7.5 by 14 3/4. 24 pounds, so it's pretty heavy. This was their top of the line deck in I think what's commonly referred to as the blue line. So I've done a gear review on the Pioneer SX939. So that was a blue line. I think the 9800, 8800, 7800, and I think those are all blue line amplifiers. We also had some other some different types of gear in the series. So definitely top of the line, definitely a big one. Aesthetics, I've always liked how these look. If you look at the model series, it went 1250, 950, 850, 750, 650. I think they had a couple of additional ones in this blue line. They also had some smaller amplifiers and other cassette decks that used the same color scheme, but they're not quite as high of quality, I guess. So the operation of this cassette deck is pretty easy. In fact, let me put a tape on. Actually, I don't have this going through sound, but you can at least see the lights jump. All right, so there it goes. It's going to start doing its thing. So I think this is a super easy cassette deck to use. I mean, the buttons are laid out right in what I believe is kind of a common sense arrangement. Rewind, fast forward, stop, play, record, pause, record, mute. You do have a manual pitch control, which is really nice if you get one of those recordings that someone recorded on a cassette deck at a different speed. If you haven't calibrated one of these, a couple of ways to do it. You take a calibration cassette tape. It's typically like a 3 kilohertz tone, and you either scope it to make sure that it's hitting 3 kilohertz, or what I do is I use a little app on my phone that will measure the sound being emitted from the cassette deck, and then you can adjust the speed that way. And speed adjustment's different on every cassette deck. It's the same concept, but different in how you actually get there. So basic operation is pretty simple. It has a digital counter, right? You have a timer start function, so you can start it at a later point. Different tape types: metal, standard, CRO2, FECR. I'm not familiar with FECR, but I remember back in the day CRO2, metal for the tape type. We have the different tape calibration mode settings. Now, I haven't really messed with these, right? But you can set bias level and EQ, and you can see the different knobs for each one of those settings. It has a Dolby on or off. I don't believe this has different types of Dolby, like Dolby A, Dolby B, Dolby C. And for those that don't know, Dolby is just kind of it's a noise reduction. Kind of get rid of some of that hiss that you sometimes hear. Going back up to the kind of this control panel here, we've got meters or meter function, so you can hit peak, peak hold, average, some memory function keys here, as well as a repeat, right? So you can repeat at a certain counterpoint, I'm assuming. I've never really messed around with any of these. You can repeat at the end. You can turn repeat off. You can dim or brighten the display, right? This will give you Dolby if you turn it on, right? And then tape type, if it's not a standard tape, Or if I were to turn this knob, it should turn that light on. You have input level for microphone, input level for line. This is also split, right? So you can do a different right and left channel. Monitor, you can, so while you're recording, you can listen to the tape. You can listen to it being put onto the tape, or you can listen to the source. Output, you do have an output level, and again, that's split. That makes it nice as well, especially if you have a cassette that is not recorded where the channels are balanced. Right. So where were these at? You know what? You probably like watching those meters, so I'll just keep them going. Because I like watching those meters. Right, so, or where are these at? Well, first, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about serviceability. Now, this was mine. It's moving on because I don't have any Blue Line gear, and although I like this cassette deck, I will tell you that, and please don't shoot the messenger, I prefer Nakamichi. This is a beautiful cassette deck. I love the aesthetics. I don't have any Blue Line gear anymore. I don't have the space for it. And Nakamichi, in my experience, can do everything, or a Nakamichi. And I'm not talking about like a Nakamichi Dragon. I'm talking about like the midline Nakamichis. They can do everything that this Pioneer cassette deck can do. They just may not be able to do it looking as cool as this one does, right? But they can certainly do everything. And if space is a consideration, like it is for me, where I want to run a cassette deck, this is too large to go where I want to run it. Serviceability on these, I'll be completely honest with you, pain in the butt. Almost every cassette deck is going to be a nightmare. I cringe and I laugh, and I have conversations with people as they contact me, or when I'm down at 402 Vinyl, you know, just talking to folks, and they bring a cassette deck in and they're like, well, I think it just needs a belt, right? Well, just needs a belt is not just like putting a belt on through, you know, your pant loops. And you know, it's 30 seconds. Just a belt can be hours of frustrating labor. It's just funny. And if it was that easy, then why didn't you change it, right? So, but these are really tough to work on. This probably took me, when I went in and I did everything on this, idlers, belts. I calibrated as much as I can using limited calibration equipment, because I don't have all of the tension, you know, gauges and all that stuff that some of these require, and I believe this one did. It probably took me a good 3, 4, 5, maybe even more hours. And I did this when I was kind of just starting out doing cassette deck stuff, but I don't know that I could do it any more quickly, right? Going through and lubing everything and changing everything. So I would say this is an advanced repair, right? If you get into this one. It's definitely not for the faint of heart, but again, that's kind of true of all cassette decks. Right, so some typical service issues you're going to run into on these, right? Idlers being worn, right? The little round rubber tires being worn, being hard. The rubber's no longer, you know, kind of spongy on them. Naturally, belts, which this, you know, cassette decks can have any number of belts depending upon how they were designed. I don't remember how many this had. It's been almost 2 years since I've serviced this, so I don't really remember. But I will tell you that I remember having nightmares about it. And then the adjustments on this. So some cassette decks are easier to adjust than some of these more complex ones. Again, you probably need some type of belt tensioner on this. I would assume. Again, it's been 2 years, so I don't remember. But that's common. So you may not even have the tools to repair it. You know, something as simple as a calibration cassette tape, right? You've got to buy one of those, throw it on here to make sure you've got the speed locked in on this. And then if it's a dual cassette deck, which we're not talking about here, but then you've got slow and fast in terms of dubbing and all that kind of stuff. So price on these. Again, these are kind of all over the place. People will ask an insane amount for these, especially in the wooden cabinet. Now I'm going to flash an image up here, a couple of different price points and examples of sales. What I have found, you know, looking over the year, and I look at eBay a couple of times a day looking for gear for the shops, looking for gear for myself. Right? I typically will see these go in, let's say, an electronically restored, mechanically restored condition, right? Without the wooden case, typically for about $1,000. You add the wooden case. You know, wooden cases are typically a couple hundred, $200-300 more. You can see people asking insane amounts for these, and some people will get them. But for the most part, you're talking about right around $1,000. For one that's working, you know, so working, not restored, maybe cosmetically it's a little rough. You've got some knobs or some, you know, something missing, maybe a button cap if these can disappear on you. You know, maybe this door is missing. You can get them for right around $750, something like that is what I've seen. I mean, you could score one for less than that if you fall into one at the right price. For parts, right around $500, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, depending upon what's available out on eBay. So, you know, if you were to get one of these for parts, just understand that you probably got your work cut out for you to get it back up and running. You know, especially if you're new to cassette decks. You know, a lot of people, you know, if you've seen my channel. I don't specialize in anything. I just kind of do a little bit of everything. You know, if you were to specialize in cassette decks, you could get really good at servicing these and knowing what to look for. You'd be much more adept at it than I am, right? So, but anyway, I mean, it's a nice cassette deck. I'm not going to say I'm going to miss it. I don't listen to a lot of cassettes. I run my cassette decks about once a month at a minimum, or when I get a new cassette tape that I stumble upon, trying to relive my youth. But again, this one, where it's at, I don't really listen to cassettes. And I've got a Nakamichi BX 311, which is a great cassette deck, really easy to work on compared to this one. So this one's going to move to a new home. But I think that's all I have on this. So, you know, again, it's a great cassette deck. If you can get one working at a good price, if you want to get one in repair, just understand you might be in for a treat, and that's not in a good way. So as always, if you like what you see, hit like, hit subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next video.